engineers of Reddit, what's something that's designed into a machine, solely because of the stupidity of human beings? Story 1. It's not a machine, but the progress bars in TurboTax are a sham. Computers are fast, and the calculations aren't that hard. Whenever it says calculating, that's just to make the humans feel like they got their money's worth. Story 2. If you work in an office, chances are you have an IP desk phone, the ones that use a network cable. Now if you pick it up you will hear a dial tone or some other white noise. That's completely artificial. It's just an audio file the phone goes out of its way to play for you. Why, normally the phones are silent, but the first company that popularized, then I think it was Cisco, kept getting complaints that the phones were broken because there was no dial tone, so they just slapped some white noise on the phones, and people stopped complaining. Story 3. If someone who makes Coke freestyle machines is reading this, you haven't worked hard enough. You'd be amazed at how many people cannot figure out how to get soda out of this giant glorified printer. Story 4. Power paper cutters require that the human operators simultaneously push 2 buttons. This is to prevent the accidental amputation of the operator's hand. Story 5. Putting barriers at railroad crossings that block the whole road and not just the directional lane, because even with lights flashing and barriers down people still think they can drive around the gates and beat the train. I've been on scene for some pretty nasty cleanups because people didn't want to wait an extra 5 minutes for a train to pass. Story 6. When I was in college we had a cold roll mill, basically 2 rollers designed to roll metal thin, incredibly powerful. During the training it was explained the position of the emergency stop button was such that if you got your hand caught in it your head would hit the e-stop before it pulled you in completely, and rolled you down to about 18 thick. Sure, your arm would be 18 thick, but at least it's just that. Story 7. I used to work in a building where the air ducts and air diffusers were originally designed to be almost completely silent. Well, apparently when the building opened a lot of tenants complained that the air wasn't working. While it was working fine, they couldn't hear it and assumed it wasn't running. The building ended up putting these sound boxes in the ceiling near every diffuser to simulate the sound of air blowing. Story 8. Working in the passenger rail industry has made me more of a misanthrope than I already was. My standard design guide for anything accessible by passengers and drivers. Yes, they're just as bad. If they can't steal it, they'll break it. If they can't break it, they'll hurt themselves with it. Those little hammers for breaking the emergency glass are held there with a wire so you can't steal them. The wire is that short so you can't use it as a weapon. That ride on the train you're getting is likely 80 subsidized by taxes. That means you're literally paying less than a quarter what it actually costs to move you around. That tempered glass windscreen you just scratched your initials into is now a safety hazard and will cost a couple $1,000s to replace. Stuffing paper into the floor heater grate creates a fire hazard. Show some respect and please refrain from vandalizing and damaging mostly paid for by people who don't ride the train just because you're bored or pissed off at the world. Story 9. Automated machines in pretty much every factory have redundant kill switches in the form of pressure-sensitive mats, light walls, essentially the mechanism that makes your garage door reverse and raise when you break the beam, etc., all because people have and will mindlessly walk into a moving robot machine and lose at least a limb. Story 10. Don't forget about the picture settings of newer Samsung, maybe others 2 TVs tucked under expert settings. Yeah, because you gotta be an expert to know how to adjust a TV. Can't tell if it's so the users feel smart, or because they know the users are actually that dumb. Story 11. Mechanical engineer here. Worst invention ever are these freaking safety nozzles they put on new gas cans. You have to push this switch, while pressing this lever, while pushing down on the nozzle, and half the time nothing comes out. These things never work properly and are a pain in the to use. I long for the good old days of just tipping the container and having gas come out. Story 12. Half of mechanical engineering design is trying to figure out how the end users are going to misuse a mechanism and either hurt themselves or break something. I seriously can't think of any mechanism that doesn't have some kind of anti-idiot thought put into it. Story 13. Not an engineer but a millwright and work around industrial equipment daily. Most e-stops on large machines won't save you. They're so large and asking them to stop on a dime ain't gonna happen. About the dumbest guard I've ever had to make is on a roll stamp machine. It's more or less a hydraulic press that puts part numbers in round objects via pressure. You put the part in, line it up, and have to hit 2 buttons a few feet apart, and that's a safety on its own. We had a guy who would kinda toss one of the parts in the holder and hope it was in the right spot when he hit the button. If it wasn't, the machine wouldn't work. Dude must have got tires of having to move the part around and figures I could save time and bump the part with my nose rather than use my hands. He did, apparently for a year or so. One day he hits the buttons with his nose on the part, the press comes down and gets the tip of his nose. He freaks out and lets go of the buttons, and that stopped the machine with him stuck in it. One of the joys of maintenance is you gotta be the guy to get the other guy out of the machine, and because of that a ton of first responder training is necessary for the job. I give him the once-over, make sure he didn't get his head or neck pulled in, and cut up an oxygen mask and more or less taped it to his mouth so he could get air while someone calls the fire department. The FD shows up and asks if I can get him out because I know my way around the machines, and I go get my toolbox. Unfortunately the bolts I needed access to were blocked by his body, and the jaws of life won't touch hardened steel, so our options were limited. The press is on a ratchet system so it doesn't throw a part of a hydraulic line blows, and luckily for the guy stuck, the ratchet was just on a new tooth, meaning it had to go down further to be released. I inform the fire department we'll have to move another 14-inch down so the press head would go back up. We finally say it, he ain't gonna die so well, just run it down and get it over with. The paramedics load him up with dilaudid and we try to go down only to find that who is stuck kicked the wiring for the hydraulic valve and broke it. I had to splice some wiring right at his level, and he's an incredibly obese Iowan, so the smells were interesting. I fix the wiring and drop the press down. It releases and he pops up looking like Rudolph the obese Iowan. Once he came back to work, I made his repeat what he did on a locked-out machine so I could make guarding for it and was impressed by his stupidity. I painted it his favorite color. He still works there and is as dumb as a pancake, but he has heart. Nice guy, just eats paint chips. Story 14. Not safety, but human impatience. Many airports make you walk a certain distance to the baggage claim so that you don't get there earlier than your luggage does. People will walk 5 minutes without complaint, but whine like 2-year-olds if they have to stand around for 5 minutes. Story 15. A lot of go push buttons are just far enough away from whatever is going: commercial finger pincher, industrial arm cutter offer, etc., so the operator can't reach the machine. Operators have solved the problem of not getting their fingers cut off by using a stick to push the button. Story 16. Sound imposers on small vehicles. We can't make that 4-cylinder sound like a V8 on its own, so we will just pipe very selective engine noises into the cabin to make it sound better. Or even better, do what BMW does and just play fake engine noises over your radio speakers. Story 17. If you have a freestanding range, it came with an anti-tip-over bracket that is supposed to be screwed to the floor and hold one of the range's rear feet to prevent it from tipping forward when a child climbs onto the open oven door. Almost no one installs these brackets because they're a pitta, but they're included with every range because in the event a child does get injured by tipping over the range, the liability goes to whoever didn't install the bracket, not the manufacturer. There's also the lid or lock on clothes washing machines. It's there solely to keep people from opening the machine while it's running, reaching inside, getting tangled in the clothes and having their arm ripped off. So much of the engineering behind consumer products is about making things idiot-proof. The problem is that the idiots keep getting more idiotic. Story 18. Newer cars with the push-button start feature were initially designed so that if you needed to turn the engine off in an emergency, even if the car was in gear and moving, you could hold down the push button for several seconds. But people are dumb and panic, so instead of holding the button down, they would repeatedly stab at the button, like when they think hitting an elevator button or crosswalk button repeatedly will make it work faster. So car manufacturers had to set up the emergency power-off feature to respond to either a long hold of the button or the repeated panic tapping of the button. Story 19. A common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Story 20. I'm a mechanical engineer. My boss has literally told me, don't make things so someone won't hurt themselves or do it wrong. Make it so they physically can't. We add a lot of poke yoke items to jigs and fixtures. Also light curtains, safety interlocks, door switches, machine guarding, etc. It does keep people safe, but when a machine is down and you have to work on it, it can be a real pain to actually make it move again when you need it to. Story 21. My city has a machine in its waste processing plant solely to clean out like condoms and whatnot that people flush down. It's not even some crazy neat like the rest of the plant, just water flowing through a set of spinning forks more or less. Story 22. Where I work we have bucket trucks. The safety device is specifically designed so you need to use 2 hands to operate it. It's supposedly designed like this so you pay attention to where you're moving the boom. Problem is, the design makes it so it's tough to navigate looking backward over your shoulder. So little bit of the stupidity of human beings and the stupidity of engineers. Story 23. Oh, I'm super late to the party, but did my company have some crazy ways of keeping people from killing themselves? So, my company has been around since 1914 and we have lots of stamping presses, hydraulic and automatic. In today's world we use a light curtain that would stop the machine as soon as something would cross its field. Easy, modern, and keeps OSHA at bay. Back in the day this technology wasn't available. So guess how we kept people out? We chained their arms. Yes, we had them in chains that would pull their arms back when the machine was completing its downstroke. We have an old picture of roughly 30 mechanical presses side by side with all of the machine operators chained to them. It just looked wrong. But yeah, thank God for technology. Story 24. Tutorials in video games. You might think it's stupid and obtuse, but you'd be surprised how many of our testers can't figure out a concept like the blue key goes into the blue door, or that a sword can be used as a weapon. Story 25. While in testing, GM was having trouble getting a Malibu with a prototype Volt drivetrain to start. It would not run. It would not get out of park. Engineers tried altering the software and testing for hardware faults, but everything came back fine. Then someone suggested they try unplugging it first. It started up fine. They all forgot about a safety feature that prevented the car from moving while tethered to a charging station. Story 26. The Castell key system makes it literally impossible to have the door of many ribbon blenders open while the machine is running. We have 2 at work, one that does 25 kilograms and one that does up to 1,000 kilograms. You have to close the lid and bolt it shut, which releases one key, which goes into a keyhole. Every key has a raised code on it, so only this one key works in this lock, which releases a second key. This second key goes into a box and is turned, which activates the power button. Only then can you activate it. Story 27. A lot of things in software and operating systems only exist to stop impatient people from overloading the computer with excessive demands. Spinning wheels, hourglasses, progress bars, none of these are required, nor are they likely to be accurately representing the progress of the task at hand. They're simply there to reassure us that the computer is doing something so we don't keep asking it to do the same thing 5 times and crash it. Story 28 New CNC machines have locks on the doors and require the doors to be locked during operation. The shitty thing about that is that maintenance mode doesn't override this feature, so when you have a job that has say 18 different tools and you have to load them, they make you close the door after you load each tool. Only thing you can do with the doors open in maintenance mode is jog th axes, so you can zero the thing. Story 29 Almost everything. I'm not an engineer yet still in school, but when I am coding I have to consider all possible outcomes because someone will always try something that you would never consider as an option. I also notice when I make mistakes and something in a program corrects or guides me to the correct solution. I appreciate it much more than the normal person because I know it was created with the thought that some idiot will need this feature. Story 30 I'm automotive mechanic, not engineer. Car wiring harnesses all have plugs that only plug one way because of their shape and, although they are color-coded, the shape and the wires also only allow specific plugs to be plugged into each other so that mechanics don't accidentally plug in the wrong thing, as idiot-proof as you can get. Story 31 Write software sometime. The error checking for user input can be the hardest part, an endless list of checks. No matter what your instructions are, users will enter just about anything. You believe you can foresee all the different ways someone could think to enter data. They will surprise you. Story 32 I work for a company that builds conveyor and machinery for the beverage industry. We built a warmer that basically sprays very hot water onto bottles in a tunnel of product that is filled cold carbonated so it doesn't fizz on this tunnel, that you feel the heat as soon as you walk within 4 feet of. Our customer asked us to put danger, hot stickers over every single pipe. His reason for this to be written on every pipe. Half the guys here have a grade 4 education. If there is something they can put their hands on, they will, even if the pipe isn't on. I don't want them messing anything up. Story 33 Does software count? Windows 9 doesn't exist, because some people are running old software which checks what version of the OS it's running on by asking for the string word representation of it, and they're so smart that they detect if you're running Windows 95 or 98 by seeing if the string starts with Windows 9. Hey race another. Google Docs used to change the cursor to the Hourglass Beach Ball cursor when you hit CTRLS to pretend it's saving. Google Docs saves literally every minuscule change you make to the server automatically, but people don't trust it, so it was programmed to pretend to do something when you try to save. Story 34 Not a machine, but basically all cleaning products produce foam when used. Also basically all cleaning products do not need to produce foam to work, but are made to do so solely so people like them. Old-timey versions of soap did tend to produce a lot of foam. Newer formulations were actually better at cleaning but didn't produce foam. People complained that the soap didn't work and couldn't even produce a good head of foam, despite the fact that said foam has no bearing whatsoever on the cleaning effects. So the manufacturers added a chemical solely to produce foam and the consumers suddenly loved the new improved soap. To this day nearly all cleaning products including freaking toothpaste still have chemicals added to them to produce purely decorative foam. Story 35 I bought a bag of shrimp and on the package it said may contain shrimp. I'm not upset that it had the label. I'm upset that it said it may contain. I hope it contains it. Story 36 At a previous job, we used to engineer things to be sailor-proof as we called it. I worked at a shipyard and it was amazing to hear some of the stories of what went down on board a Navy ship. That's not to say sailors are stupid, but there were some bad eggs in the bunch that would occasionally damage things with intent. And as a general rule, military folk aren't easy on equipment. Story 37 I'm a structural engineer, so I mostly design buildings and not machines. But most of the things that I design that require someone to build, I take human error into account for almost everything. If something's too complex to build, they're just going to take the path of least resistance and probably mess it up. That fastener spacing needs to be 434 maximum. Let's bump it 4. That concrete beam only needs to be 10 wide x 21 deep. Just bump it to 1 foot wide x 2 feet deep. This also means that you may use the same connection everywhere, because using 2 or 3 connections could get messed up depending on the quantity and complexity of connections OFC. This also applies to members, foundations, and just about everything else in between. That's just scratching the surface, and of course it's on a case-by-case basis. Story 38 There's actually an entire scientific methodology around designing things so people can't screw them up. It's called Poka yoke. It's the reason diesel pumps are larger so they don't fit into standard gas tanks, or why electrical outlets are either symmetric so they can plug in either way or only fit one direction like a 3-prong style. Story 39 As a software engineer, literally all of software UI is designed to be idiot-proof because if there's any possible wrong thing to click, the user will definitely click it and call us about the bug. Story 40 Jewish Sabbath machines. Can't do X on the Sabbath. Why not do it but in a way that only breaks the spirit of the rule, like typing GD instead of God as if it's going to bypass some omniscient being's word filter. Story 41 Knew someone who did this when I was in high school. A double section of track. He leaned out and watched the tracks recede behind him, not on the track side, but the middle of the 2 tracks. After a while another train came the other way, which he did not see because he was looking backwards. He hit something not sure what and got minor brain damage. For the rest of high school he had a funny name which I can't remember, Mooney, Head, Buffhead something, and he was mentally slow. I think he got mild brain damage. Story 42 From Apple's chess engine code. Paradoxically enough, Moving as quickly as possible is not necessarily desirable. Users tend to get frustrated once they realize how little time their Mac really spends to crush them at low levels. In the interest of promoting harmonious human-machine relations, we enforce minimum response times.
Const estime intervalle qu'interactive de les deux, 0 const estime intervalle qu'automatique de les 4, 0.
Story 43. The little sign next to a fire sprinkler in hotel rooms telling you not to hang clothing. I wonder how many hotel floods it took to make those signs necessary. Story 44. As a software engineer, almost everything. If a user could consistently use something the way it was supposed to, then all the code I have ever written could be 50 smaller. But you have to account for every little thing that someone could possibly do wrong to ensure a good UX. Story 45. A pretty common example used in my classes was that photocopiers are outfitted with substantially thicker glass than necessary because of the amount of people attempting to photocopy their asses, but instead breaking the glass and cutting themselves. Story 46. This is just called good design. It's not that the users are stupid, everyone gets tired or makes a mistake sometimes. If the engineer has allowed the user to reach a state where their product is putting the user in harm's way, the engineer probably messed up or didn't anticipate something. Story 47. Lawn tractors used to mow while backing up no problem, until someone slid down a hill at their preschool daycare and, when the owners didn't have enough money to sue for, they went after the mower manufacturers. Now tractors either stop mowing if you go backwards or shut off entirely, unless you activate the system that turns it off. Story 48. We had some test equipment we had designed. There is essentially a test fixture that slides out towards the operator on a track. You place the product on top of it, the fixture slides back and a plate comes down, pressing on the product and tests it. Well, some of our older, shorter female workers were complaining about pinch hazards on the tester. Apparently when the fixture slid out towards the operator, some women were getting their breasts pinched. So we had to install presence sensors similar to what's used in garage door openers to make sure the track was clear before sliding the fixture out. We affectionately called them breast sensors. Story 49. I work on the F-22 Raptor, and it's designed in a way that it only requires about 10 different tools in order to do almost all maintenance on it, because humans read maintainers are dumb apes and we can't remember good. Story 50. I can tell you city folk that farm equipment have no safety features. If you make a mistake, you're dead. If you're lucky, you'll lose an arm or leg. Driving a tractor, pulling a plow, and you turn 45, the tractors will pick it up and toss it on top of you. An example. Story 51. Apple used True Random on the original iTunes and iPod. The nature of True Random means you can get a string of the same artist or album, even the correct order of songs. People felt this want random because it felt like a pattern, so Apple had to adjust the random to pseudo-random, i.e. not true random, where it weights related songs lower than unrelated songs to keep people happy. Story 52. This is literally my life. I and my team design high-volume assembly lines. We have the easy stuff like redundant e-stops, pull cord kill switches, light curtains kill machine motion when tripped, profile gates won't allow anything but the part to pass through without force, and bright red flashing lights to let an operator know that automatic movement is happening. But we also get even deeper sensors and signals to let an operator know a hoist is attached properly, which won't lift if the sensor isn't tripped. This has redundancy to verify that it's clamped correctly, usually over under travel sensors. We have force limiters at pinch points to make sure an operator doesn't get hurt if their finger is in the wrong place, tool sensors to make sure something attached isn't dragged down the assembly line, or flung back at an operator. It's a glorious system of checks and counterchecks held together by controls engineers that don't have enough time to sit down all day. Safety in a truly modern plant is astounding. We spend weeks and months just analyzing how people can hurt themselves during normal operation or maintenance procedures before a machine is even built, and even more systems in place when we enter the unknown. Story 53. Not engineer but a user. Safety switch on hot water tap. Many places have a water tap that has two levers, one for boiling water for coffee and tea and the other for chilled filtered water. At the Innovation Center at a major university, the hot water is locked and requires two hands to operate it. It makes it hard to hold a cup under the tap and switch on the hot water. Story 54. High-speed CNC machines have safety systems to avoid you from milling with the doors open. If a milling tool breaks, it can shoot like a bullet and hurt you very bad. They spin over 20,000 RPM sometimes. Do you really need to be told to mill with the doors closed? Story 55. I work in an automated welding plant building steel body parts for a major automotive company. I have literally made a career of designing and adding features to our machines to countermeasure stupid. The Japanese call these features pokeyokes. Some translate this to idiot-proof. I disagree. I call it idiot-resistant. There is no such thing as idiot-proof, and despite all our amazing technological advances, they're always building a better idiot. Story 56. If you count the government to be a machine, pretty much anything requiring a building permit, yes, you and your handyman father and 3 tradesman siblings could properly do an addition to your house. Most of us might be smart enough to not mess with electricity and as a professional to do it. We have a convoluted, inefficient ways to ask for permission to make changes to our own property with heavy fines do deter you from skipping the process because the average person thinks they're the stars in their own house makeover show. Story 57. Closed door buttons on elevators don't work, except in hospitals and care homes and the like. People complained when they were removed, so they left them. BC people like the placebo effect of thinking they closed the doors faster. Story 58. Not an engineer, but most modern convertibles are designed to only allow the top to move when the car is not in motion, the reason being that people would try to move them whilst driving, and funnily enough they'd rip them clean off. Story 59. Not so much a machine, but the little needles that diabetics use to test their blood sugar have retractable needles, not for safety of disposal, but because people were reusing old needles and sharing. This makes them single-use and forces the user to dispose of the used needle as it's rendered useless. Story 60. For my senior design project, my team designed a solar canopy like this for students to charge laptops, cell phones, etc., and it was intended to be located in the center of student housing. When making our initial presentation to the university's facilities heads, they brought up a very unusual question. How many students can it support? None of our team members had prepared for this or done any real stress analysis besides why this thing could withstand a tornado and supporting the actual panels. After seeing our lack of preparation, the head of facilities explained that basically everything on a college campus must be idiot-proof. The example that stands out in my mind is, would a drunk 3-year-old hurt themselves on it somehow? If so, alter your design. After hearing this, the whole campus changed. I realized all tables, benches and chairs are all bolted down, banners on light posts are out of reach, awnings are just out of reach. TLDR college kids drunk 3-year-old sorry for formatting as I'm on mobile. Story 61. Not exactly a machine, but in game mode on TVs designed to make the pixel response and input lag better. TV manufacturers purposefully leave some processing on so that stupid people don't complain when their TVs look bad when still in game mode. Story 62. I have an opposite example. The customer demanded that an emergency stop button would be put on the fastest moving part of the machine. Trying to reach for it could kill you in a lot of ways. Story 63. The clunk 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 of a cash machine is artificial. Your cash will come out when it's ready. It's basically the same mechanism as Qbert. Story 64. Light screens. Used to work at a factory that had massive presses for stamping metal parts. Light screens are designed to halt the machine when something is detected in the danger zone. It's basically two vertical bars with lasers pointed at each other. 'Cause people lack the common sense to not reach into a machine that they can see is capable of stamping 14-inch 5-foot wide sheets of steel like child's play. Edit IR photocells, not lasers. Story 65. Not an engineer, but IRC certificate Boeing aircraft have a function that logs circuit breaker pulls because there was an accident caused by a pilot who pulled the breaker that controls the warning that the slats are not set to takeoff position when the throttle is positioned in a way that the computer sees as takeoff power. The problem is the throttles are opened in the same way briefly while taxiing to overcome inertia, and so that warning would go off frequently during taxi. The investigation into the accident uncovered that it was fairly common practice for pilots to shut off the breaker controlling that alarm before starting taxi. TLDR circuit breakers in airplanes do not work the same way as the snooze button on your alarm clock. Story 66. I've noticed some automated call-in systems have keyboard typing sounds when the robot answering service is thinking, so I'm supposed to think that it's more real because it takes longer and it types, haha. Story 67. In electronics, the circuit often has a diode connected to the positive battery terminal so that if someone puts in the batteries backwards, bad things don't happen to the circuit. It's called reverse polarity protection. Story 68. My old engineering tutor used to tell us about how architecturally you could evaluate exactly where you would need to add metal poles into pillars to reinforce them. Normally only 2 or so would be needed in 2 of the corners of the pillar. However, because of the entire stability of the building being compromised if the poles were in the wrong corners, if the builders rotated the blueprints or something, so instead they add poles to all 4 corners, just to cover their bases. Story 69. Files and folders on a computer. The computer doesn't care. It's one hard drive full of a long list of ones and zeros. We're just used to file cabinets. Story 70. Did you ever hear of the Los Alamos Demon Core? It's a ball of plutonium that was involved in 2 radiation accidents at the government's atomic bomb laboratory. On May 21, 1946, physicist Louis Slotin and 7 other Los Alamos personnel were in a Los Alamos laboratory conducting an experiment. It required the operator to place 2 half-spheres of beryllium, a neutron reflector, around the core to be tested and manually lower the top reflector over the core via a thumb hole on the top. As the reflectors were manually moved closer and farther away from each other, scintillation counters measured the relative activity from the core. Allowing them to close completely could result in the instantaneous formation of a critical mass and a lethal power excursion. Under Slotin's unapproved protocol, the only thing preventing this was the blade of a standard straight screwdriver, manipulated by the scientist's other hand. Slotin, who was given to bravado, became the local expert, performing the test on almost a dozen occasions, often in his trademark blue jeans and cowboy boots, in front of a roomful of observers. Enrico Fermi reportedly told Slotin and others they would be dead within a year if they continued performing it. On the day of the accident, Slotin's screwdriver slipped outward a fraction of an inch while he was lowering the top reflector, allowing the reflector to fall into place around the core. Instantly there was a flash of blue light and a wave of heat across Slotin's skin. The core had become supercritical, releasing an intense burst of neutron radiation estimated to have lasted about a half second. Slotin quickly twisted his wrist, flipping the top shell to the floor. The heating of the core and shell stopped the criticality within seconds. While Slotin's reaction prevented a recurrence and ended the accident, the position of Slotin's body over the apparatus also shielded the others from much of the neutron radiation. but he received a lethal dose of 1000 radians 10 grays neutron and 114 radians 1.14 grays gamma radiation in under a second and died 9 days later from acute radiation poisoning. The nearest person to Slotin, Graves, who was watching over Slotin's shoulder and was thus partially shielded by him, received a high but non-lethal radiation dose. Graves was hospitalized for several weeks with severe radiation poisoning and developed chronic neurological and vision problems as a result of the exposure. Oops. Story 71. I work on design of distribution transformers green boxes next to buildings and gray cans on poles, and about half the mechanical design is making sure that you can't stick your finger or a clothes hanger into it. Story 72. In America, we have some older signage that's still around, especially on refurbished or transplanted machines. I don't take them down on the off chance someone might heed their warning, but they aren't even mentioned in my standards and practices anymore. Story 73. Elevator car doors. The inner set have a lock that prevents them from being opened from inside the car, largely because of people yanking them open then either being mutilated or falling through the gap between the car and the wall. Same reason for the car top escape hatch locking from the outside. There is a guard hanging below the elevator car because people who have been trapped in an elevator rush out and will sometimes fall into the hoistway if the car is stuck slightly above the landing. Landing doors are designed to the strength they are largely thanks to the people who think the car will magically be there when they bust through. Many more examples of human psychology in this industry. Story 74. There's actually a whole branch of engineering design dedicated to this called Bakayoke, which literally translates as idiot-proofing. It's basically designing products in such a way that it's impossible to it up. Story 75. Raman spectroscopy machine I use requires you to press down on the button to turn the laser on and keep it on. Let go and the laser turns off. It was made this way so people won't accidentally open the covered cartridge to change samples and blind themselves from the laser, thinking they turned it off. Story 76. Apple's MagSafe adapter for their laptops was solely to prevent people from destroying your 1000 laptop when they tripped over the power cord. Instead of yanking on the computer, the plug just comes off. I've seen so many people in office and school environments with wrecked laptops thanks to other people not paying attention. Story 77. I am an industrial engineer. We have an entire semester of industrial safety, which is basically how to avoid workers from being idiots and how to avoid a lawsuit. Story 78. I had a college professor who said something along the lines of don't try to design something to be completely idiot-proof. You'll speed up the evolution of idiocy. Story 79. Traffic engineer. So not so much a literal machine, all of it, you stupid, stop signs because you can't be bothered to stop and look, lane lines because you can't keep to your own space, roundabouts and signals because you don't know how to wait your turn, speed humps and guardrails because you never slow the down. I have to do the fatality reports and analysis for a decent-sized city, and 95 of them boiled down to someone wasn't paying attention, or murder. Story 80. Everything. I'm a mechanical designer in an automation company doing turnkey machines. If it's possible to get hurt or do something wrong, the operator will. One example that's from a particularly safety-conscious customer required several layers of very costly safeguards. We had 50-ton press as part of a bushing machine, one side of which was mounted on linear rails. These rails have had a FOSS of 8, with solid end stops. Even though there was no conceivable way that the moving end would come disengaged, we were asked to build an external superstructure. We're talking 10 m tall steel I-beam frame with 10x FOSS steel cables and couplings to support it. This was all in a safe working area with no operator access. Also, poke yoke is the bane of my life.